So we'll go ahead and jump right in. Like Lorraine said, I'm Kristin. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and today we're going to talk about meal planning and prep. And this topic is so important because planning meals in advance is just one of the best ways you can help yourself stick to your goals, right? It can be helpful to, track your diet, write down what you ate after the fact, like a food journal situation or using an app like MyFitnessPal. But even better can be planning in advance what you're going to eat. That way you have it all ready and on hand. And if you're even going to take it a step further by preparing a little bit of these foods so they're ready to grab and go, especially if you're busy, a professional, you're in school, you have a family, we're all super busy these days. So there's a lot of reasons to try to stay ahead of that hunger. Because of this quote right here, I love this quote from Virginia Woolf. One cannot think well, love well, sleep well, or sleep well if one has not dined well, right? So if you're hungry, you're not going to be on the top of your game, when it comes to work or school or even your relationships with people. I think we've all experienced that hangry feeling, right? Like when you get a little bit too hungry and you start to get on the edge of losing your cool. I know I've been there. So it's always a great idea to be prepared, set yourself up for success. So if the healthy options are ready and if they taste good, you're a lot more likely to, avoid the drive-through or avoid picking up some takeout, which can definitely get costly, especially if you're doing it regularly. Save yourself some money and try a little meal prep. So you've probably heard of Meal Prep Sunday, right? That's pretty trendy right now. Sunday seems to be a pretty good day to do it for sometime on the weekend, but there's a lot of different ways to fit it into your schedule and make it work for you and your family. So today we're going to talk about what are the best foods to prep, how to decide what to eat in general, right? Like how to plan meals and snacks, what to stock your fridge and your freezer and your pantry with. Talk a little bit about food safety and some easy options for meal prep, some that are no cooking involved. And then here's just my standard disclaimer that this isn't medical advice. Always talk to your doctor before starting any diet or exercise plan. Okay, so what is meal planning and prep? So planning is obviously deciding what you're going to eat in advance. So you're going to decide what you're eating for your meals, get your recipes ready, choose the day that you're going to prep, and then write down your plan. And there's a lot of different ways to keep track of what you're going to eat, and I'll share some of those in future slides, but you can use good old-fashioned pen and paper. You can use apps. I like to use just a plain old notes app on my phone so I can jot down as, the thoughts cross my mind throughout the week, like, ooh, it would be good. I want to cook like this, right? And so I'll think of something that I have a recipe for that I just am having a hankering for, jot it down, and then that's going to go into the meal plan when I sit down to actually make it later. And then the prep is obviously the getting the food ready to eat, right? So it could be as simple as just washing and chopping some fruits and veggies and getting them ready to eat. So you don't have to, wash something, 10 times during the week when you're going to get an apple or whatever piece of fruit or vegetable, but just get it all over with at once and have it all ready and accessible to just grab and go as you need throughout the week. And then, following through on your plan. So, cooking what you planned earlier in the week. And we're going to go through in some more detail on how exactly to make this work and how to make it as easy and painless as possible. And this is something I mentioned in other talks that I've done if you've tuned in previously to some of these other library chats that we've done, but it's always important to make it yours, right? So you don't need to turn your whole diet upside down. It's important to keep your favorite foods, right? Almost everything can be incorporated in a healthy way. It's usually about the portion size and the things that you're combining it with. So making nice balanced meals that include a protein, a starchy carbohydrate component, and vegetables. Ideally, one or two vegetables that are going to fill up half of your plate. And in this way, really nothing is necessarily off limits strictly. So it's important not to eliminate your favorites, maybe keep them to, more of a special occasion, but keep your family traditions. If there's something that you like to do, like maybe an egg and bacon brunch on the weekend with your family, something like that, that's important to keep around. So allow yourself some flexibility and work in some of your favorites. Okay, so get organized first. So this is the first tip, is to kind of make yourself a solid routine. And Monday to Friday can be a good way of thinking about like staying on track. And so it depends on, your work schedule. Maybe you don't work a typical Monday to Friday 9 to 5, but pick kind of what your 5-day span of the week is going to be. And that's going to be the days that you really focus on your routine. And this way you can kind of stick to the plan and not really have to worry about what you're going to eat during the week. But on the weekends, that's where you have some time for flexibility, a little bit of leeway. You can have your brunch with the family, whatever it is that's important to you. Now, a lot of people like to spend some time on the weekends doing the actual planning and grocery shopping and the prep. Now, some people find that that takes up like too much of their weekend, so that's totally understandable. So one way to go about it is to break it up. You could do a little bit of prep on the weekend and then another like mini prep halfway through the week. And that way you have fresher food and you're not necessarily getting tired of eating the same thing five days in a row. And there's a couple ways to approach the prep. You can cook in bulk, meaning you make like a couple of recipes and you cook it in its entirety. It's all ready to eat, and you portion it out into containers that are going to be ready to, heat up and be ready to eat very quickly when the mealtime comes. You can take those with you to work. You can stack them in your fridge or your freezer, depending on how quickly you're going to use them. This is a good way of going if you like to, stick to recipes. An alternative is you can prep some components of the meal. So this, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, but this is going to be like you cook maybe a batch of kind of plain chicken breast that you can use for various meals throughout the week. You cook a vegetable or two, like you steam some broccoli, maybe you roast some potatoes. So you have several different components that you can kind of work with throughout the week to mix and match, or to combine with some other easy things that you already have. So like if you steam a big pot of brown rice, you might use that, to have rice and broccoli and chicken for one meal. And then when the rice starts to get a day or two old, which is how it's recommended to do stir fry, that's a good time to maybe stir fry that rice and some of the leftover veggies, some of the leftover chopped up chicken, maybe throw an egg or two in there. And that way you have the components like pretty much ready. It's going to way cut down on your actual cooking time, but you're not going to have to eat the same meal over and over again, which is, I think, one of the problems with prepping in advance is you don't want to get sick of what you're eating. You want to enjoy it. And then another important part is to plan for some takeout or some restaurant food or even some treats, because most of us don't really want to be cooking or eating leftovers 7 days a week, right, for every meal. So it can be helpful to just schedule that in so that I'm gonna work hard all week, sticking to my plan, eating the healthy foods that I prepped. And then maybe Friday, Saturday, whatever it is for you, you're gonna allow yourself to get some takeout or just sort of relax the plan a little bit. And this way you're not getting, tired of doing the same thing. And then it just allows you a little rest, because nobody wants to be, in the kitchen constantly, right? Even heating up leftovers. So it can be a great idea just to plan for that once or twice a week. Okay, so how do you make the meal plan? So a good start is to take inventory of what you have in the pantry, in the fridge, in the freezer. Of course, like what kinds of appliances and gadgets you have. You don't really need much in the way of meal prepping, just simple pots and pans and maybe a blender, but you don't need anything fancy necessarily to do some prep ahead of time. So just take a look at the pantry, see what you have on hand. Of course, you're going to save money if you can reuse some things that you already have. So you notice you still have, half a bag of rice or some broccoli from last week that you didn't cook yet. That's going to be a good starting point to build from. So once you figure out what you already have on hand, next step is pick your recipes. So you might already have some favorites, a good solid foundation of recipes that you rotate through. If you don't quite have this yet, it can be a good idea to start to build this. And you might save recipes by printing them out and keeping them in a notebook in the kitchen, or some people like to do a little like file on note cards in the kitchen, something you can easily flip through. Or if you're more digital, save them, on your save bookmarks pages on your phone or on your computer, so you have easy access to these things. Some people even like to make like an Excel spreadsheet and make notes on, how the meal was and what they want to adjust. If you're very detail oriented, that can be helpful as well. But at the very least, just get a recipe or two in mind. And some things don't require an entire recipe. You might just be assembling really simple things that don't require much cooking. So you might not need any complicated recipes necessarily. So step 3 is make your grocery list, and step 4 is go grocery shopping. So you can do steps 1 through 3 kind of throughout the week as you're thinking about it. This doesn't all need to happen consecutively, on the weekend or whenever. And like I was saying, you might kind of think of a recipe during the week that sounds good, so you could jot it down and just sort of start building your list from there as you have time throughout the week. And then when it comes to go grocery shopping, a good tip I'm sure everyone is aware of is try not to go when you're hungry, right? So you've got your list to refer to, so you can pretty much stick to that list because you've made that grocery list based on the ingredients that your recipes call for, or the exact foods that you plan to eat for the week. And this is going to cut down on those impulse buys in the grocery store where you're just kind of walking around going, hey, that looks good. And then maybe you don't necessarily get around to cooking it. And that's where, we can accidentally have some food waste. So this can really make it a little bit more efficient when you go shopping. So try not to go hungry. I mean, impulse buys happen. You might throw in a few extra things, but this is a good way to sort of stick to your plan as much as possible. And then step 5 is when you get home, organize things so you have it easily accessible. And this might look different for everybody depending on, what your kitchen setup is. But ideally, you're going to have things in the fridge where you can see them, front and center, or at the very least, exactly where you know that they're at. And some people like to take everything out of the boxes and fill up, containers in the fridge so it's very easily accessible and easy to see at a glance what you have and what you're running low on. Especially if you have children who need easy access to snacks and things, it can be helpful to have a little very kid accessible drawer or a container in the fridge that has, washed up fruit, cheese sticks, yogurts. Maybe in the pantry they have a little stash of like crackers, graham crackers, goldfish, things like that that are pretty simple and easy for you to just grab and go as you need. So like I was saying, there's a lot of ways to sort of keep track of what you're going to make for the week. This is just an example of a template. I actually got this one off of Etsy, and you can make your own. You can use good old-fashioned pen and paper. But I like something like this because this is like a typable PDF. So you could type it in and just have it, a digital copy on your phone or on your computer. Or you could print, laminate, and write with a dry erase marker. Or they even make like little magnet things for the fridge now that are like this, essentially weekly meal planners that are either a dry erase or like a chalkboard. And I like this a lot. We have one on our fridge because it helps just keep everyone on the same page for what's for dinner. And even if you don't write down breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, if you just focus on maybe the family meal for the one that's going, to be posted in the kitchen, that can cut down on the what's for dinner questions. You kind of are all on the same page. Everybody knows just what to expect and what to potentially, start getting ready when dinner time comes around. So let me slow down for a minute. Any questions about anything so far? Please feel free to chime in the chat box. Lorraine's always so good about monitoring that. So if there's any questions or comments, please let me know.
Yeah, please do put them in the chat box and I can relay them to Kristin, or if you want to ask her the question directly, let me know that and I can unmute your microphone. Okay, I'll let you know if there's any, Kristin.
Thank you. Okay, so that was making the plan. So now let's talk about the actual prep. So the first step is going to be get your appliances and your cooking equipment ready. Essentially, that means just make sure your pots and pans are clean, right? Like whatever you actually need to cook. Also a good idea to make sure the kitchen is relatively organized and in good shape. You know, there's not dishes everywhere. You have a nice clean work surface. Organize your ingredients. You know, you might take everything out of the pantry. It might go straight from the grocery bag onto the counter for what you need for the recipes that you're about to make. So you know before you start prepping anything that you have it all on hand, so you don't figure out halfway through a recipe that you forgot to get something. And then step 3 is prepare that food. Easier said than done, right? Now you could consider meal prepping by food group. So this is sort of the cooking, not recipes, but more like the components style. And so you might choose a protein, a vegetable, a whole grain, a couple of snacks, and maybe a couple of extra things. Now, you don't necessarily need to do one of everything. You know, do what works for you. Even if you just prep 1 or 2 things, it's probably going to save you some time and effort later in the week. But a good protein to prep is chicken. Can't really go wrong with that. It's so versatile. You can, you know, eat it plain, you know, add a little barbecue sauce, mix it up into chicken salad. Of course, the options are endless. Boiled eggs are another great protein prep because it doesn't take a lot of time or effort. You know, they boil in just a few minutes and they'll keep in the fridge to eat, you know, with a little bit of salt and pepper, or make into an egg salad, put it on a sandwich or on top of a salad. Again, very versatile. So when you're prepping things like this, it's good not to necessarily do much seasoning or spices beyond, you know, salt, pepper, a little garlic, maybe some paprika, oregano, but you don't necessarily want to do anything too strong. So that way it can be very versatile and work with no matter what you're trying to do with it. So vegetables, so you could just wash and chop and store some vegetables, meaning you might take like some celery and carrots and scrub them up and, you know, peel and chop and get them all ready for, you know, for celery sticks and carrot sticks, and have them in little Tupperwares or little baggies in the fridge, ready to have for a snack or a component of a lunch. If you're going to cook some vegetables, steaming is a great option for prep because it works a lot of moisture into the vegetables. It softens them up and they tend to reheat pretty well. Roasting veggies is my favorite way of prepping veggies. It gives them a nice crispy texture, but that doesn't always reheat the best. So you can kind of experiment with what works best for you. So you might prep some of the components ahead of time and then just roast your veggies right before the meal. But you can also make like a big salad. Salads keep pretty well for a few days in the fridge, especially the key to keeping a lot of this stuff good in the fridge is to keep it dry and covered. So water and air are the enemies of keeping food fresh for a long time. So keep everything sealed nice and tightly so it doesn't have air coming in and basically starting that oxidation effect of creating, you know, the decomposition where your lettuce starts to turn brown. We don't want to see that. So keep it covered. And also you can put like a paper towel in there after you've washed the lettuce, make sure it's really dry, and then just like stick a little paper towel in the middle of the salad, and that will help absorb any leftover liquid that's in there. You can cook some whole grains ahead of time, like doing a batch of brown rice or quinoa. It can be helpful to do like a grain of the week. You know, maybe 1 week you're doing rice and then it's quinoa and then it's pasta. You like to bake bread, that's another week. So this way you're kind of rotating through your grains and keeping it interesting and fresh each week. Snacks. So portioning out your snacks can be helpful, even if you're not necessarily going anywhere, but just for portion control. So instead of, dipping right into the bag or the container of, if it's chips or whatever you're eating, look at the portion size, what it recommends on the container. It might be shockingly small. Sometimes it's just like a half a cup or something even smaller sometimes. And decide for yourself, what's a reasonable portion. Put it in a little baggie or a Tupperware, have it, stacked up in the pantry or the fridge, and it's just ready for a single serving, perfect size snack. A good idea is to keep a fruit bowl on the table. If you don't have this, it's good, especially if you have kids in the house. And washing the fruits before you put them in the fruit bowl is a great idea. That way everyone can just, grab an apple, grab an orange, grab a peach, whatever, as they're kind of coming and going. If you like to make smoothies, a time saver is to make smoothie packs. So you could collect all the fruits that you want to put into your smoothie and put them in individual little Ziploc baggies that are just enough to create, one or two portions of smoothies, whatever you're planning to make, and you can just dump that right into the blender. You can even add baby spinach, even like some chia seeds or flax seeds into this bag. It all will freeze up pretty well. And the only thing to leave out is the liquid. So when you go to make the smoothie, you just dump your frozen fruit and anything else in the smoothie pack right in the blender, and then you add your milk or whatever liquid you're using, and it's ready to blend instead of pulling out lots of different containers. And then there's freezer meals. So if you're cooking basically any recipe that you just know you're not going to finish on time, or even if you're intentionally planning on just doubling the recipe so you have some more for later, a lot of stuff freezes pretty well. Especially like soups, casseroles, chicken dishes, vegetables. Most of this will freeze and reheat pretty well. And we'll talk about some more ideas on things that will go really well in the freezer. Okay, so now we're going to get into our no cook or very light cooking meals. This is pretty easy stuff that mostly just requires some assembly for the prep. So, and we're going to break it down by meal. So for breakfast, a really simple, quick, easy breakfast could be Greek yogurt. And I say this with just about everything. If you want to increase the nutrition and stay fuller for longer, you can always add fruit and nuts or seeds to an item. So to yogurt, to cereal, to oatmeal, adding fruit and nuts is such a good way to increase the fiber, the protein, the vitamins. You get some healthy fats from those nuts. It turns a plain cup of yogurt or a plain cup of oatmeal into something flavorful and delicious that will keep you full for a lot longer than just that one thing by itself. And then, of course, you could use fresh fruit, frozen, dried fruit, any kind of different nuts or seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, walnuts, almonds. The combinations there's so many different ways you can keep it interesting. So now be careful with your yogurts. I think I always talk about this when yogurt comes up, but some have tons of sugar in them. So just look at those labels. Make sure it's not crazy packed with sugar. Some of them have like 20 grams of sugar plus. So you want to keep it, as low as possible. The Greek yogurts and the Icelandic yogurts tend to be the best because they have a lot of protein in them. And they tend, just the process that they make them with makes them really creamy. And they tend to taste good without a ton of added sugar. So those can be good choices. So if you go with the plain, that's going to be your lowest sugar option. So totally plain, nothing added. Now it's very tart. So if you don't really like that, it's something that you could get used to, or sweeten it up yourself by adding the fruits or maybe a little drizzle of honey. Or if you're just really still not feeling the plain Greek yogurt, it's a good additive for a smoothie. It makes your smoothie creamy, and by the time you get all those fruits and other things in the smoothie, you really don't taste the tartness of the Greek yogurt, the plain yogurt anymore. So those are easy breakfast options. You could always do a whole grain cereal. I always recommend oatmeal if you're going to do a cereal because most of the boxed cold cereals have a lot of sugar added to them. Some are better than others, so again, read your labels. But some of the like Kashi cereals, the Special K, the gray grains, some of them do have some sugar from the like dried fruit that's in there. So some of the like raisins and dates and things. So if it's coming from that, it's not quite as bad. But if they're just like sprinkling tons of extra sugar in there, that's what to look for. So on the label, look for the added sugars. The total sugars will include the natural fruit sugars too, but if you look at the added sugars, that'll tell you they're, adding lots of extra sweet. And so that stuff doesn't require any cooking. Now, if you want to do a little bit of light prep for your meals, and I did include oatmeal in that because you could do the overnight oats, which doesn't really require cooking, right? It's just combining oats, milk, and then maybe some vanilla extract, a little cinnamon, maybe some fruit, whatever you want to jazz it up with. But the overnight oats are a great choice for saving yourself some time, and it can make oats a little bit more palatable in the summer when it's so hot because you can eat them cold in the morning. We talked about the smoothie packs. So instead of, pulling 5 different containers out of the fridge and freezer to make your smoothie, get it all prepped at once so you can just quickly make a smoothie before work in the morning. And if you are thinking ahead of time again and boiling some eggs, again, that's a great breakfast. So 1 or 2 eggs with a piece of fruit, you have protein, you have fiber. That's a great little breakfast right there. So continuing the quick, low cooking meals, let's talk about lunch. And this stuff could be lunch or dinner, but this tends to be great stuff to bring with you to work or to school if you need something that you don't necessarily need to heat up when you get there. Can't go wrong with salad, right? So if you like salad, this is one of the best ways to get vegetables into your diet. I always like to say, think about what our grandparents ate and our great-grandparents and all the other humans that lived before us. Essentially, they lived off of plants. They lived off of plants and then, of course, meat and this would all be things that they either grew themselves or they foraged or they hunted. Nowadays, we have so many processed foods and some aren't bad. Yogurt is processed and granola bars are processed. These things aren't necessarily bad, but then we know it gets worse than that, right? Like fast food and lots of commercial sweets and things like that are really hard for us to digest. So the more natural whole foods that you can get into your body, meaning essentially plant foods, so vegetables and fruits, beans, whole grains, nuts and seeds, these are a great foundation of a healthy diet. So those bagged salad mixes can be a really good time saver. The ones at Trader Joe's tend to be really good quality, and you'll get things that you may not have thought to put together in a combination. So they'll have like a Mediterranean themed one or like a taco salad one. They'll have a lot of different variety, and it'll save you money too because you don't necessarily want to buy enough ingredients to make just a couple of salads. You'll have a lot of leftovers often, but this gives you just exactly what you need. So those little bag salad mixes can be great, or even just the plastic containers of the pre-washed salad, that mixes, the lettuce and greens, that will save you some time. A good quick lunch hack, and you can get this from the grocery store if you're at work and you didn't bring anything and you want to get something healthy and you have a grocery store nearby, pop into the grocery store on your lunch break, get a can of tuna, an avocado, some whole grain crackers, maybe a piece of fruit, and you can put together a pretty decent little balanced meal with the protein from the tuna and the fiber from the fruits and the vegetable and a little bit of whole grain from the crackers. Or, alternatively, if you are planning ahead, this is all stuff that you can keep in the office. You can keep in the office kitchen or just at your desk, or even just keep stashed in the kitchen at home for kind of a quick, easy emergency meal that doesn't require any cooking. And a squeeze of lemon really jazzes up tuna or any fish, of course. So that can really brighten up the whole little meal. So if you are just not trying to cook at all, maybe you just need like an easy day or an easy week, Snack lunches can be great. So this is kind of like a bento box, right? And you can even get those containers that have lots of little sections in them. So you could put in one container a handful of blueberries, and in the other one some hummus, and in another some cheese, and in another some nuts. Maybe have some chopped up veggies, whatever components work best for you. But this can be kind of a nice light, easy lunch, especially in the summer when it's so hot. Maybe you don't want something so heavy, and that requires no cooking. Or it could also double as, of course, snacks. So you could snack on those things throughout the day. Now, if you are trying to do a little prep ahead of time, frozen burritos are one of my favorites. And you think burritos and it doesn't necessarily sound healthy, but when you make them at home, they really can be. You could do a breakfast burrito with scrambled eggs and maybe some salsa, some potatoes or sweet potatoes, a little avocado. It's a pretty healthy option, especially if you use like a whole grain wrap. Or you could do like a more traditional like lunch or dinner type burrito with chicken, maybe some brown rice, a little bit of cheese, and then some roasted vegetables go well in there. So like some zucchini or squash, some onions, some peppers. And so you can assemble a little like assembly line, right? For you prepare all your ingredients, you roll up all your burritos, you roll them up into foil, and then you put them in the freezer. It's always good to put a date on something that you're going to put in the freezer so you know when you made it. You don't want to keep it around too long, but these will keep in the freezer for quite a while. And they're such a great like emergency meal to just grab and heat up in the microwave in just a minute or two, and you have a nice hot meal to eat. And then another option, we kind of talked about salads, but doing like a salad of the week. So this might be, this week we're doing a homemade ranch dressing and we're going to do like a ranch salad. And then next week we're doing more of a Greek salad. So it can be helpful to like kind of pick themes, and that can sort of keep you inspired to try different things. Okay, so we're going to talk about pantry staples, and anyone want to chime in with things that are great to keep on hand in your pantry? And we're going to talk about the fridge and the freezer in a minute. So this is just kind of like your dry goods. And obviously there's lots of pictures here, so that'll give away a few of them, but feel free to chime in with your favorite pantry staples.
I think you've got everything that I've got in there. You have some nuts, almonds and Brazil nuts.
Mhm. Yeah, so this picture kind of gives away a lot of it, right? But these are great staples to have on hand. And this goes
Popcorn.
into some more detail. Yeah, popcorn's such a good one, especially if you like to pop your own. You avoid a lot of the chemicals that are in the microwave bags.
Well, what can you do instead of salt on popcorn?
Parmesan cheese is pretty good, although it's kind of salty itself, but that's a good
Yeah.
alternative.
Mhm.
Um, or little olive oil can be good. If you've tried that, like Skinny Pop, that's what they do with it, is put a little olive oil in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to avoid the salt when it comes to the popcorn because it goes so well together. But I think just a little sprinkle of it is no big deal. But yeah,
What
so
about some like protein powder to make a protein shake?
yes, that's a good thing to keep on hand, especially if you haven't gotten to the store to get Greek yogurt or something else with protein in it.
Hmm.
And so I kind of break these down into, well, first it's kind of like pantry basics like spices. It's always good to have garlic and onions and ginger and olive oil and vinegar on hand. Can't go wrong with all that stuff. And then some easy protein options that are going to be shelf stable. And this is good stuff in the event of an emergency, right? Like if power's going out, if a storm is coming or something, these are good protein options. So canned beans, And then, of course, if you do have access to cook, the bags of the dried beans and lentils are really inexpensive for how much food and protein you get out of them. And they're very versatile. You can add those to a lot of different dishes, serve beans on the side, or incorporate them into different like stews and soups, especially when the weather starts to get a little cooler. Canned tuna and salmon. And canned salmon sounds like it's not great, but it actually is surprisingly not bad. So you want to get good quality canned fish. So with the tuna, it's good to look for chunk light. That's the one that tends to be the lightest in mercury. So the chunk light. But even the salmon is bad, and you can make like a nice like salmon cake with that, kind of like a crab cake, but with the salmon. Keeping nuts and seeds on hand is good. That they'll stay on the shelf pretty well for a while. And then of course your grains like pasta, rice, whole grain crackers, potatoes and sweet potatoes and avocados. Of course, there's a lot more vegetables, but most of those you would store in the fridge. So these are just kind of the more like shelf stable ones. Now, avocados, everyone knows how hard it is to have a ripe avocado, right? Like you buy it and it's hard as a rock, and then like you go to use it and it's mushy. So that's like kind of an exception, right? You have to use the avocados just at that sweet spot. But you know, other things that are going to be more stable are going to be like your citrus fruits, so oranges and limes and lemons, that fruit bowl that we talked about, you know, apples and bananas, different stone fruits like peaches and plums are always good to have on hand, especially when they're in season in the summertime. And then some treats. You have to have some treats, right? So maybe some chocolate. The dark chocolate is the best one because it's lowest in sugar. And I mean, you can tell it doesn't taste the same as the milk chocolate, but it does kind of help not go overboard on the portion size. But whatever your favorite treat is, I think it's okay to have it on hand as long as you know it's not going to be too much temptation for you to go overboard. But little granola bars with the chocolate chips, that can be a nice little treat. Little bags of trail mix that have the chocolate chips in them and the nuts and the fruit. Those are some of your like kind of healthier treat options. And then what are we going to keep in the fridge and the freezer? So lots of good stuff pictured here, like your meats, your frozen veggies and fruits, your dairy. So things to keep in the fridge. So peanut butter and almond butter, you might be surprised to see that in the fridge, but if you're getting the natural peanut butter that doesn't have a lot of additives to it, it's going to be kept in the fridge. And really the only ingredient needs to be just peanuts and maybe salt. But a lot of the shelf stable peanut butters have like palm oil added to them and some other not so great for you stuff. So you should keep your nut butters in the fridge. Dairy, of course. So if you're gonna drink dairy milk, I usually don't recommend like buying organic everything, but when it comes to dairy, that's a good one to err on the side of organic if you can. Same thing with the yogurts and the cottage cheese. The quality tends to be a lot better. And then of course your vegetables, you know, check out your vegetable bins in the fridge, you know, the crisper drawers. Are they full of salad greens or spinach or broccoli? Is the fridge stocked with different kinds of berries and melons? Do you have some protein to cook? You know, chicken and fish and maybe leaner cuts of beef and pork. If you like to incorporate chia and flax seeds into your oatmeals or your cereals or your smoothies, those are going to stay good for a really long time in the fridge. So that's the best place to keep those. Olives and hummus, these are good ways to get kind of healthy fats and vegetable and plant-based proteins into your diet. So these are good fridge staples as well. And then the freezer, love stocking the freezer because this stuff can be really good quality and it'll last so long. So you can have the bags of frozen fruits that go really well into smoothies. Frozen vegetables is just a quick, easy addition to a meal. The grains, you can even get frozen quinoa or different kind of pre-cooked dishes in some of the freezer sections of grocery stores. So those can be a quick heat up option for a side. You can keep bread and tortillas in the freezer so you don't feel the pressure of like eating the whole bag of bread before it goes stale. Just keep it in the freezer and take out a couple pieces as needed. And then of course, protein, you can always freeze chicken and fish or, any other kind of protein that you're going to eat. And then treats, frozen yogurt, even a little bit of ice cream. The popsicles are great, this time of year when it's so hot. So always good to have a couple of treats on hand. So food safety, of course, is so important, especially if you're prepping a lot in advance. You don't want stuff sitting around for too long. So, the font on this is kind of small, but the gist of it is if it's a meat, if it's a dairy, those things go bad pretty quick. So they're not going to stick around for too long, especially once you've opened the container. So like the milk might say it's good for another few weeks, but if it's been open for a week, it's probably done. So really milk is just like 4 or 5 days. Fish goes bad really quick, as we know. So keep an eye on how long something's been open. Store it really tight, seal it up with wrap or whatever you need to do to keep the air out of it. And then a good food safety tip is to keep your meats on the bottom, as I'm sure most of you know. So they're going to be like on the lowest shelf in case there's any dripping. You don't want raw meat dripping on your vegetables that you're not going to cook because that could make you sick. Keeping the fridge organized is helpful. So, you just can see at a glance what you have. And if the fridge is too packed, you're not going to get a lot of air circulation. It's not going to stay as cold as it needs to be for food safety. So it doesn't start growing bacteria. So, have things kind of spaced out enough that you can see what you've got. It's not all crammed in there. So a good rule of thumb is like up top is going to be your eggs and your dairy. Medium shelf is going to be things that maybe you've prepped, so like your containers. And then of course on the bottom is your meats. And then in your crispers, that's your vegetables and fruits. Some people find that their fruits and veggies don't need to be in those crisper drawers and they have better luck just keeping them front and center so they don't forget that they're there. So that might work better for you too. And then the door doesn't stay as cold as the rest of the fridge. So don't keep your milk in the door of the fridge. You want to do like more like water or like beverages, things that don't necessarily need to stay so cold. And then FIFO, first in, first out, is a good rule of thumb. They practice that in restaurants. So if you bought it a long time ago, obviously clean out your fridge, right? Especially that's a good thing to do when you're taking inventory, when you're starting the meal planning process, toss anything that's too old. But first in, first out. So the first thing that you put in the fridge is the first thing you're going to use instead of accidentally using, what you just bought. So you could rotate stuff. So you push the older stuff to the front and put the newer stuff in the back so that you're going to use up the stuff that you bought first before the new stuff. And to kind of sum it up, I think I mentioned this in a previous talk, but all foods can fit into a healthy diet. You don't necessarily need to eliminate anything. You can meal prep your favorites and enjoy them in moderation. And a good rule of thumb is that 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time, you're going to try to stick to your health plan and, eat what is best for you, what leaves you with the most energy and feeling good. And then 20% of the time, you're going to relax a little bit. You're going to eat those foods that maybe feed your soul instead of necessarily your body. This is going to be your favorite splurges or treats. Be mindful. Don't undo all the work you did all week, but maybe on the weekend or whatever works for you is the time to just sort of allow yourself some flexibility. You don't need to stick to a strict plan every day of the week. And then try to crowd out some of the not so great foods with some more of the healthy foods. So a really simple way of doing that is just add more plants to your diet. And a great saying is that the dose makes the poison. So there can be too much of a good thing, right? We can accidentally overdose on water, right? You can have too much of anything, but it's really all about the amount that you eat. So you can still have most of your favorites as long as you're just not going overboard with the portion. And probably everybody's familiar with Michael Pollan. He's a really awesome writer. He's not necessarily a nutritionist, but he writes really insightful books about food, the food systems, and he has some good little nuggets of wisdom, and this is a good one. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So simple, right? We know it's not that simple when putting it into practice. You know, our lives are busy and it's complicated, and it's not always easy to put this stuff into practice. So, you know, doing the best you can and trying to work in as many plant-based foods as you can be a good starter in working towards your goals. If you feel like you need extra help, you know, a more personalized plan, if you have lots of extra questions, feel free to get in touch. A registered dietitian is a really good resource because we have had a lot of training. We all have bachelor's degrees, and we accept insurance. So I currently accept most of the major insurances, so you might be able to just bill everything to your insurance and not pay for anything. So if you have any questions, you can contact me at my email address here or check out my website. But I think that is about all that I have for today. I just want to say thank you so much for having me.